Was it like? Well, that's an interesting story. My father had a sporting goods store when I was first born, and in 1933, Hitler came to power. At that time, I was 8 years old, and we were Jewish. So the Nazis, Hitler had a book, Mein Kampf it was called, which meant my battle. And in that he indicated that the enemy of Germany were the Jews and the communists. And as Jews, we were immediately identified. And my father's store was picketed by Nazi stormtroopers, and he decided at that point that wasn't going to work, so he sold the store. And he thought that was a sort of a catastrophe, but in retrospect, it was one of the best things that happened because he now no longer had to worry about the store. And it became more and more difficult economically. And by 1938, when I was 13, he decided that he was unable to support himself in Germany. He had to see what he could do. He got a visitor's visa to find some distant relatives in the United States. And he left after my 13th birthday. He left for the States to look for the visitors, for his relatives. And he found the relatives, but they were, this was a depression in 1938. Everybody had a hard time. And in order to sponsor somebody to come from the States to become a citizen in the United States, from outside the States into the United States, you had to have an affidavit. And the affidavit meant as a document that states that the person who is giving you the affidavit will be able to support you so that you will not become a burden to the state. In other words, you weren't going to go on welfare or something like that and be a burden to the other citizens. The relatives he found were in no position economically to give that affidavit. Again, he thought that was a terrible thing, but it again was a blessing because he had to stay longer to see what he could do to find somebody who could give him an affidavit. In retrospect, the affidavit was ridiculous because it took about 5 years for you to be able to emigrate. This was 1938, the war started in 1939. We never would have made it. At that time, my mother and I was the only child. We were waiting for my father to come back, but at our door came the Gestapo. The Gestapo was the secret police of the Germans, and they were looking for my father. And my mother told them, well, my father was on a business trip, and when he comes back, he'll tell them. They said, well, make him report to us. Well, my mother knew of a personal friend who had also gotten the word that he had to report to the Gestapo. And on the day that he reported to the Gestapo, the next thing we knew, he had either jumped or been pushed out of the fourth-floor window of that building and was dead on the sidewalk. And so she wrote to my father, the Gestapo is looking for you, don't come back. Well, that was easier said than done because in the States he was at the mercy of the Jewish welfare organizations, and they told him, well, we can support you here for a short period of time, but eventually you're going to have to go back. Well, in the meantime, things got even more difficult in Germany, and the passports were collected to be stamped with a J, and my mother thought, well, the next thing is they will confiscate the passports. So she turned to me, I was 13 years old, and said, what do you think? Should we try to get out and meet your father in the States? Well, I had just gotten a beautiful bicycle for my 13th birthday. I had a beautiful stamp collection. I had I was on a soccer team. I was in the forward line. I was exactly where I wanted to be, but I was a little bit concerned. And let me show you something here. I had been in a second grade class in a public school and had a teacher by the name of Mr. Schumann, and he was a wonderful teacher, I thought. I waited for him to come back because they said that third grade teacher will be the same Mr. Schumann. When Mr. Schumann showed up in 1933 in my third grade class, he came in a Nazi uniform. And here we are in the top picture with my, well, I got it. Right at it. It's the same thing, just that was Mr. Schumann in the middle, in the Nazi uniform. And all the kids started to get into the Hitler Youth. You can see some had hats, some had belts, some had brown shirts, and most of those kids probably were killed during World War II because they went into the German army and the survival rate was pretty low at that point on the Russian front. You can find me, I'm up the top row of serfs from the left. So then I was transferred into a Jewish school, and again, most of these kids down on the bottom, they were all Jewish, and they didn't get out, and there weren't that too many that got out after that. They were all killed in concentration camps. So it's a rather difficult thing. But anyway, my mother went and got a visitor's visa for herself and for me, and it was lucky they didn't have computers, because if they had recognized that my father was already in the States, they wouldn't have given us a visa, because they didn't want any refugees to come into the United States. Well, as it was.
Teachers and students, at this time we will transition to third period. Teachers, a reminder, beginning with the end of third period, we will switch back to using our bell assistants.
I'll cut it short. Anyway, we got out, we met my father, and we ended up in New York on the 30th of October, 1938. On the 9th of November, just not even 2 weeks later, is when they had this, what was called Crystal Night. That was a pogrom against the Jews, where they smashed all the windows in the stores that were left that were Jewish, burned the synagogues, arrested anybody that they got their hands on. A big catastrophe, and for us, that was the savior, because nobody was sent back from the States after that incident in Germany. So we became legitimized, even though we were only on a visitor's visa. When I was drafted into the Army, within a couple of months, they took me to a courtroom where I was sworn in as a citizen, while my parents had to wait and go for 1 day to Canada and then legitimately emigrate in 1944. Well, we didn't get very far. You have to go to the next class?
Yeah.
Okay.